Welcome back to Sedlak Off-Road School. Today with another adventure bike review, and we're riding Kawasaki's KLR 650S, the lower seat height KLR version. We're going to take it off-road and see what the lower one is capable of. So the biggest difference between the KLR-S and the KLR, and the most obvious one, is just the lower seat height. The KLR-S 2.2 inches lower, so you're looking at 32.1 inches seat height. So if you're a shorter rider, if you're a new rider to riding these adventure bikes off-road, that comes in really handy. A lot of the bikes are taller. If you've watched our review of the Aprilia Touareg, that was one of the things we pointed out, that the lower seat height of the bike was a nice thing, a nice feature to have. The KLRS even lower than that. So if this is what you're looking for, a lower adventure bike that makes it a little bit easier for you to ride, an adventure bike that allows you to get into the world of off-road adventure riding, the KLRS is a really good option for you. So as with all our reviews, we wanted to take this bike off-road and see how it performs when you're riding some more technical terrain. And what I can say right away is that it has very much a street bike feel to it. So it's very comfortable in a seating position when you're sitting on the bike, when you're just cruising along. The bike is very easy to ride. It's very planted on the trail. The distance from where you're sitting to the handlebars is very comfortable. So if you're new to riding off-road and you're not standing up that much, that makes it very easy for you to get used to the bike, to get used to the terrain, to get comfortable on some of the trails. Standing up, especially when you're a taller rider, there is a lot less bike. So this bike is really intended for shorter riders. It's a great bike for female riders to kind of get into adventure bike riding, because you can tell with the lowered seat, there's not a lot of bike between the foot peg and the top of the seat. So as a taller rider, when you're standing up, there's just not that much to hold on to. And in the beginning, that takes a little bit of getting used to. One of the biggest things we've noticed riding some, especially the rocky sections, is just that the ride height compared to some other adventure bikes is quite low. So there were a lot of spots where we would kind of scrape the ground, hit a rock. So if you're really getting into technical riding, it would be nice to have a little bit more room there. But then again, the bike is geared towards people that are new to trail riding, new to off-road riding. So if you ride more single trail stuff, fire roads, some very basic trails, you don't really have any issues. Suspension's definitely on the plusher side, but in just common off-road terrain, that's really not that important. You really only start to feel that when you're riding some of the more technical stuff, and at that point, you're probably ready to upgrade to a bigger bike anyway. When it comes to the power of the bike, it is definitely not the most powerful adventure bike. You're looking at 35 horsepower, and the KLR, a very forgiving engine. So it's not a very torquey setup. It's not an adventure bike that just kind of rips away from you. It just kind of tracks along the trail. A lot of the stuff that we see in this video I rode in first gear, just because second gear is already quite long. So the overall setup is more geared towards longer rides, like tour riding, where you run higher gears, where you just kind of riding along dirt roads and normal roads. The tighter off-road stuff, a lot of first gear, a lot of clutch work. So if you're looking for a super powerful bike, this is not the option. Then again, as a rider that's new to the adventure world, the off-road world, the power is just really easy to get used to. The bike is really easy to ride. It responds really well once you're coming off the clutch. So in those lower gears, first and second, super easy to ride. So where the KLRS really shines are situations like this. You could see in this clip, I'm riding up this hill. There's no way for me to go forward, so I have to turn the bike around. As I mentioned earlier, the lower ride height of the bike, the lower seat height, and some of the rock sections, the bike just scrapes the ground a little bit. So not ideal over there. Situations like this, it's perfect. It's easy to get both feet on the ground. So what I'm going to do is just rock the bike back and forth a little bit, ride it across, then turn it around, ride it back down the hill, instead of having to walk it all the way back like I would have to on a bigger bike. That would make it a lot more difficult for me to just rock the bike back and forth on the side of a hill like this. So now you can tell with the seat height of the KLR, it's really easy for me to get both feet on the ground. I want to get the bike across here, so I'm going to just ride it up and down a little bit, angle it, and then bring it across. lean into the hill so I'm not gonna lose my balance. And then once I get there, I'm just gonna stop, focus on the downhill, and get the bike down. So now I have the bike right here, and you can see I'm leaning into the hill, looking where I want to go. So I bring the bike forward a little bit more, and then just slowly angle it down, and then ride it down. So the KLRS comes in two versions. One is the ABS version, and that's the one that we rode today. And then there's one that's non-ABS. The ABS is set up towards off-road riding, but if you watch our videos, we always recommend to turn off the ABS when you're going off-road. Unfortunately, the KLRS doesn't have that option, so you're stuck with that off-road ABS. And in some of the sections, it is more difficult to ride the bike that way than if you were able to switch it on and off on some of these other adventure bikes. If you don't ride these super technical sections though, especially the downhills, you won't feel it as much. Like the parts where I felt the ABS the most were downhill sections, faster sections where I had to get on the brakes hard and kind of swing the bike around. You're just not able to do that type of stuff on this bike, or at least not as easy. And you just have to anticipate that your braking, especially coming down the hill, will take a little bit longer just because the ABS will be kicking in. So at 456 pounds, even though it's lower, it's definitely a heavy adventure bike. The way it rides on the trails, it kind of takes that weight to its advantage. It's a very planted bike, like I said in the beginning of the video. And what I mean by that is when you're riding the bike, it feels like it just sticks to the ground. It doesn't really move around that much underneath you. It's a very stable platform. So it's easy for you to, work on standing up, to get used to the different body positions when you're off-road without having a bike that's very twitchy, that's very nervous underneath you. Obviously, if you get stuck, if you have to move the bike around a little bit, you feel that weight, right? So if you're new to adventure riding, just be prepared for a bike that feels amazing while it's moving, but heavy when you're trying to move it from a standstill. So far, this is what we think riding the different trails. So we want to get into some of the pros and some of the cons of the bike. Biggest pro is definitely the seat height, right? If for shorter riders, just so easy to ride. You could see in that last clip, it's so easy for me to get my feet on the ground, maneuver the bike around. The suspension definitely set up for some mellow off-road terrain, so it really performs well there. And then just the power, the distribution of the power of the bike, it's so easy to ride that it's a real joy to just cruise along and kind of put it second, third gear, ride along these trails and just have a good old time. So the cons for me are number one, the ABS. If you ride a lot of off-road, if you ride more technical terrain, like I said, I prefer to be able to switch the ABS off. And it's unfortunate we don't have that option here. The other thing is just the ground clearance, right? Same issue. If you're riding more technical terrain, you're gonna come across more rocks, you're gonna come across more bumpy trails, and that's just where the bike kind of scrapes the bottom a couple of times. One more thing that was tricky for us today, when you're riding standing up, you can see the rubber mounted foot pegs, and all adventure bikes come with these rubber mounts. We always recommend taking them off if you ride a lot of off-road, just because they get too slick and you kind of lose your footing and you come off the foot peg. All these things though are if you're really looking to go heavy trail riding, technical terrain. If you're just riding down the fire roads, if you just ride down simple trails, you're not going to have any issue with the ground clearance. You're not going to really have any issues with the ABS or the foot pegs, because you won't be standing up that much. So if you are wondering now, is this bike ready to go off-road? Can I take this bike on some fun trails? Everything we rode today on the Yamaha Tenere, we rode on the Kawasaki KLR 650S. So there weren't any sections where this bike couldn't go. So, other than the ground clearance that I mentioned, where we would scrape the floor a couple of times or the ground, those were the only sections where that came up. There was nothing where we were like, okay, we cannot ride the KLRS in that room. So if you're thinking that this bike cannot ride off-road, you're dead wrong. It can definitely be ridden on some trails, ridden in some technical terrain. You just need to be able to control the bike in these situations. So if you're looking to get into adventure bike riding, to gain some off-road experience, the KLRS is a really good option for riders that would really benefit from a lower seat height. It's much easier on these bikes to gain confidence, to challenge yourself, to ride some harder terrain, because you are able to get your feet on the ground. The power is easy to handle. The overall bike is really easy to handle. And if you're going for a longer ride, you have all the options available to load the bike up and take all your equipment with you. We enjoyed this bike a lot, and we're gonna go back out now and ride some more terrain, put it in some situations where it's a little bit more technical. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we will have more content coming up with the KLR 650S, and later on the normal KLR 650. So it will be interesting to compare the two bikes to each other. If you like this type of content, please like this video. Let us know in the comments if you had a chance to ride the KLR 650S and what you think of it. And if you would like to join us out here in San Diego for some adventure bike training, check out the links in the description below, and we'll see you next week for another video.